Right, we're on. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the first instalment of the Hampstead Garden Suburb Tikkun Leil. It's a bit early, it's only 5 o'clock. The session now is going to be about laughter. We all love a good joke. Laughter is a very powerful tool. It's a gift, and it can be used for so many good things, to deflect awkward situations, to cope with insults, all sorts of things. A sense of humor is a great gift. In fact, the Jewish people Avraham Avinu, right, our ancestors, Abraham and Sarah, Avraham was told at the age of 99, and Sarah was 90, that in 1 year from now, you're going to have a baby. What did they do? They laughed. Why did they laugh? Because it's something so unexpected. When something's unexpected, it makes us laugh. And Hashem said, you're going to call that baby Yitzchak, Mitzachik, he will laugh. And that's really what the Jewish nation is based on. To have a sense of humor can get us through so much. And in fact, the Jewish story is going to finish with this. It says in King David said in Tehillim, we sing this in the Shir HaMalis, that then our mouths are filled with joy, our tongues with joy. When Mashiach comes, there'll be laughter, it'll be unexpected. When things can look so bad, suddenly it turns around. When something's unexpected, it just makes us laugh. Like, you know, you've got a very well-respected, well-dressed rabbi in his long black coat and his Homburg or a strammel, and he slips on a banana peel and lands on his bottom. It's funny, right? Because it's unexpected. Or an elephant in a mini, things like that. Things which are contrast and things which are unexpected makes us laugh. So I want to introduce to you now a wonderful, world-renowned speaker, Rabbi YY Rubinstein. I was in a shiva with his son. That was a laugh. And I knew him from Manchester. He now lives in New York. And he's a very sought-after speaker. And we're very, very blessed and grateful that he's here to address us here this afternoon. And without further ado, I would like to ask Rabbi YY Rubinstein to join us here at Hampstead Garden Suburb. Oh, hello!
Isn't this nice?
Hello, Rabbi YY. How are you? Nice to see you.
Oh, I'm just awesome. But being here in America hasn't affected me in the slightest. I'm the same regular guy from Scotland you always knew.
You've still got the accent. No.
I've got the accent here.
Yeah, you're still Scottish.
Yeah.
I know you've got a very great sense of humour. Naturally, some people are born with it. I mean, there's nothing worse than people who think they're funny and they're not. But yeah. I'm a big fan of yours. I've read your book, and in it, the same one. There you go. And in it, you mention, I know, you know, many in your own personal life, there's been some troubling times, and you mentioned about how a sense of humour can really help people get through tough times. Do you have any examples of how that's helped you?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think you're alluding primarily to the fact that my late wife passed away after 5 years of cancer. You can find that in that book, which I just have to have one here because I was quoting it in a different share. This book has actually helped lots and lots of people. It's called The Little Book for Big Worries, Dealing with Serious Illness. I'm not trying to sell it because I don't think you can get it in the UK anymore because it's more or less sold out.
I'm glad I've got mine then.
Yeah, I'm glad. I hope it's autographed. But in it, there was one of the most important bits of the book was a true story. Rebbetzin Gottlieb, Alei Shalom of Yerushalayim, was a very close family friend, Professor Dr. David Gottlieb's wife. And when my wife was first diagnosed, she said something which is absolutely brilliant. She said, I'll give you a piece of advice. And I said, yes. Keep an idiot book. I said, pardon? She said, keep an idiot book. Lots of very, very nice people are going to say lots of very, very stupid things to you, which will upset you enormously because, of course, you're very sensitive at this particular moment. Instead of being upset, keep an idiot book. And I remember there was an extraordinarily nice lady came bouncing up to my wife and said, and she had a bit of an accent. I won't do the accent because that might give away who she was. But she's a very nice person. And she said, you know, Mrs. Cohen had the same disease as you, and she got a blessing from a tzaddik that she should live long enough to see all her children married underneath the chuppah. Why are you marrying your children off so quickly? Wonderful! Boom! Right. Now, most people would get extraordinarily upset. But I'd remember what Mrs. Gottlieb had said to me, keep an idiot book. And when we heard that, instead of going, how could she say, we was like, hey, you're the new number one. Now, she was actually knocked off the pedestal several times after that. But instead of being very upset, and that was frankly pretty tactless and upsetting, instead of being upset, you just go, little smile to yourself and put it mentally into the... So sense of humor is incredibly, incredibly important.
It reminds me once I was at a shiva. I went to a shiva of someone who I was close with. They'd lost their father, and I went in there and didn't know what to expect, but they were all laughing. I was like, okay, what's so funny? They said someone just came in. They'd just been to another shiva. Someone's mother died, and they asked my mother if she's looking for a shidduch because they've just been to another shiva. He'd lost his wife, she'd lost her husband, looking for a shidduch, and they meant it genuinely. I think sometimes people mean well, but it could be well mean, and they were just laughing, like you say, they were laughing, and that's what kept them through it. So I want to ask you, Rabbi YY, what makes us laugh? I know the idea of something unexpected, like I said earlier. You know, if you see a very well-respected person slipping on a banana peel, landing on his bottom, right? It's funny. And you're going to laugh, unless you're the guy, obviously, Rabbi.
Yeah. You're the bottom, yes.
So what would you say makes people laugh?
Well, it's funny, you know, I had the great enormous pleasure and privilege over the years of, because when I used to live in the UK, as you probably remember, I used to broadcast a lot on BBC Radio and TV, and for about 15 years I was a regular in the Terry Wogan show. I love Shalom, who was incidentally one of the funniest people I became. Very clever. So my experience, having worked on TV with him, John Cleese, and various other extraordinarily funny people.
Classics, yeah.
All classics, as I am myself.
I'm going to say.
A certain vintage, I can make you laugh. Basically, in my experience, very funny people are also highly intelligent. And what they're doing very often is analyzing a situation, just like the one we mentioned before, but seeing a very funny side of it, the outrageous side of it. And instead of allowing the thing to hurt or the thing to be just mundane, they bring it to life and let you see the other thing. There's the famous English comedian. I have to admit, there is a difference between Scottish humour and English humour. And I don't find this guy particularly funny. You will know him as Mr. Bean.
Oh yeah, Rowan Atkinson.
Rowan Atkinson. Now, if I remember rightly, Rowan Atkinson, whether I like him or not, I mean, this is not distressing him in the slightest, which is a mistake. But anyway, basically, he's a very, very successful man and very, very rich. He's
very funny.
And very funny for most people. Anyway, but the interesting thing about him is, if I remember rightly, he's got a master's degree from Cambridge or Oxford, I think chemical engineering or something like that. He's not an idiot. He's very, very clever. And most people I know who are very famously funny people, also famously clever people. So it's a mistake to think, funny people are clowns. They're usually highly intelligent.
Yeah.
But Rowan Atkinson, when he lectures on the subject, he divides humor into 4 categories. And it's very intriguing because you mentioned one before. 2 actually. The first one is the slapstick. That's the falling in a banana peel, to use your technical phrase, on your bottom, or as we say in Scotland, your bahookie. And I don't know why we laugh at that. Particularly, as you said, if you're the guy landing in your bahookie, you're not in the slightest amused. But we do find it funny. That's the Max Sennett, the Charlie Chaplin, that era of comedy, right? We laugh at that. Then he says, another thing that makes us laugh, there's 4 of them, I can't remember one of them, is if something is incongruous. If you were going to ask me this, I would have prepared a picture to show you. I once was looking for a funny picture to use in a presentation. And I was just Googling funny pictures. And there was a row, a photographer had managed to get a row of dogs sitting there, somehow sort of looking, sort of posing for the camera. There was 12 dogs.
Yeah.
Alsatians, and there was collies, and there was corgis, and there was poodles. I have to admit, I actually find poodles extremely funny anyway. I can't take a poodle.
They're cute.
The dog, the rings and the woof. I just don't get it. So there's this row of 12 dogs, and they're looking at the camera, sort of. And sitting in the middle, with 6 dogs on one side and 6 dogs on the other, was a cat. And it just looks so incongruous. That incongruity itself just provokes laughter. Just so weird. But it's the unexpected thing that normally gets us to laugh. And of course, that's why
it's out of place.
Well, it's that's why the bit of the joke's called the punchline. Because like a punch, you don't see it coming, it's and it just hits you on the nose. I was once punched in the nose by a professional boxer, by the way. And I didn't find that one funny either. But it was unexpected. The poor fellow was punch drunk. I was just chatting to him, and suddenly he had a flashback to his days in the ring, and my nose was his opponent. Do you ever see the cartoons when Bugs Bunny is hitting the head and you see stars?
Yeah.
If you're a corona of stars, hate to use that word these days, a corona of stars, exactly what happens. There I was, sort of lying on my back, and the guy was begging me not to phone the police. He didn't mean it, and I was not interested in phoning the police. I was merely interested in trying to locate which part of my head my nose was now located. But it's the unexpected. That's why we call it the punchline. You don't see it coming. If you see it coming, well, if I tell your joke, then you go,
it's not funny. Yeah.
It's the, boom, that's the one that usually gets.
What's your favorite joke? Come on, Rabbi.
Dog walks into an old Wild West saloon. He walks up to the bartender. He says, "Give me a shot of red eye." The bartender says, "We don't serve dogs. Get up." The dog goes, "Arr. Give me a shot of red eye." The bartender says, "We don't serve dogs. Get up." The dog goes, "Arr. Give me a shot of red eye." The bartender goes underneath the bar, takes that double barrel shotgun, shoots the dog in both legs. Dog scoots out the door. 10 minutes later, the dog is back. 2 golden six-shooter swing from each hip and a bandage in both legs. He walks to the middle of the barroom floor and he says, "I come from the man who shot my paw." So that's my favorite joke.
I don't get it.
Who shot my paw? You never watch Western.
Oh! Okay.
Paw, dog, wolf.
Yeah, yes. But you said you shot both his legs. You know they have 4?
Well, it was only interested in one paw. He's got 4 paw.
So I want to leave you on your own now, Rabbi YY, to ask you to, that we're always with you. Immi and Mochi B'Tzara.
Thanks.
Always with you. But to give kind of an historic, Talmudic look on why laughter is important, how it can be used positively. We all know how a bad joke and the wrong word when you think you're being funny can be so destructive. But on a positive way, laughter from the Talmud. I'm sure you'll quote the story of a broker in the market, Leonovi. So I would like to, ladies and gentlemen, Rabbi YY Rubinstein on how laughter can help us get through tough times.
Mm-hmm. It is an incredible gift, as I think Rabbi Guttentag just said. It's a gift. If you've been given a sense of humor, it's fabulous. I remember, it can get you out of some serious, difficult situations. When I was living in Manchester, there's a synagogue there. Now, I won't mention the name of the synagogue because that would be inappropriate, and the people in the Shrubbery Synagogue would be very upset with me if I did. But there's a synagogue there, an Orthodox synagogue, which might be called the Shrubberies. But I might be trying to mislead you. But anyway, they were, as the euphemism goes, they were between rabbis, which means they fired the previous guy and were looking for a new one. And they actually approached me because they wanted me to become the new rabbi of the synagogue. I was a student chaplain in those days, and they wanted me to become the new rabbi of the synagogue, thus demonstrating unequivocally that they certainly had a sense of humor. Now, I didn't see myself as being able to occupy that role. I'm far too Scottish from Glasgow. I do not have the innate tact and diplomacy that is required to be the rabbi of synagogue. And so although I was quite seriously flattered by the compliment of the invitation, but I explained that it's not my forte. But they had a problem. And the problem was that by some strange demographic quirk, they had 6 consecutive bar mitzvahs coming one after the other. And of course, being a traditional United Synagogue type synagogue, it was, if the rabbi's not there to address the bar mitzvah boy, then it detracts from the full tradition of the day. So they asked me, would I come and perform these 6 bar mitzvahs? And I said, of course I would. So I arrived on my very, very first Shabbos morning. The president of the synagogue, an old friend, was standing outside to welcome me, and he escorted me to the front of the synagogue, where I was invited to occupy, interesting phrase, to occupy the rabbi's box. Now I have to tell you, because I'm broadcasting to Blighty, to the old country, you will understand immediately what I say when I say they wanted me to sit in the rabbi's box. Because I now live in the United States and lecture mostly over here and in Canada, then when I say the rabbi's box, people are absolutely perplexed. Now, it's the same in America as it is in England. The rabbi has a seat at the front, usually on the left or right, depending on what the custom is, of the Arna Kodesh, but it's just a seat. But of course, in the UK, in England primarily, the rabbi's seat is encased in a wooden box, which I have to explain to them, which opens at the front and opens at the side. And as far as I know, trying to think of all the countries I've lectured in, I think the UK is more or less unique, and probably the Commonwealth, who got it from the UK. England is unique in... This is not me. It is. Gosh, we'll just get rid of that. Ha ha! Check the cheek of her. That was my wife, and she wasn't invited to this. I will speak to her later. If I switch off my phone, which might help, then she certainly can't get through to me. This is the moment, by the way, when she's just remembered that I'm doing a live broadcast, which means I will have enormous currency to spend on the guilt trip the next time I want to buy myself something. But I go off at a tangent. Anyway, back to this. I have never understood why this custom evolved in the UK, particularly. Why are the English so keen to put the rabbis in wooden boxes? After all, he's going to be in a wooden box soon enough anyway. Why they are trying to speed up the process, I'll never really understand. Anyway, he put me into the wooden box. And if you consider this, if you've got an astute mind, you will probably have noticed that logically, the box was constructed according to the dimensions of the original rabbi, who was the synagogue rabbi when the building was first built. And it's quite obvious, if you ever go to this shul that might be called the Shrubberies and sit in the rabbi's box, that the original rabbi was a dwarf. He could have had a role as, in the Lord of the Rings. I sit with my knees under my chin. Anyway, I sat there, and the shul slowly started to fill up. There was about 50 or 60 men. I didn't look up at the women's gallery because I'm far too holy. But by the time that they were going to bring out the Sefer Torah, so we're now getting to the boy doing his bit, the shul was pretty full. And I'm guessing, it's a long time since I've been there, does it take 600 people or 800 people? That sort of size. Anyway, so basically the president said, Rabbi, would you escort the Sefer Torah in its journey toward the Bima? And I said, of course. And so off I went, saying Good Shabbos to everybody. Shabbos, they say Good Shabbos back, onto the Bima, back to the box. And then after an aliyah or two, the president came back and said, we'd like to give you an aliyah. What's your Hebrew name? So I told him my Hebrew name was Yehuda ben Avram. And so they called me up and out of the box, onto the Bima, back to the box. And then he came up to me and said, would you say the prayer, after the lining was finished, would you say the prayer for the royal family and the state of Israel? And I said, of course. And so it was out of the box and onto the Bima. Now, by this stage, the synagogue was completely and totally full. And the chazan of the shul was standing beside me on the Bima. And he's an old friend of mine, and a South African fellow. So I should say he's not the chazan anymore, he's left, but he certainly was then. So I whispered to him, it's called Bertie. I said, Bertie, how do you say it? Because as you know, some people read the prayer for the Queen and the royal family in English, some people read it in Hebrew, and some sneaky people read it a mixture of Hebrew and English. So I whispered to him, Bertie, how do you say it? And he just said, pointing at the Siddur, just read precisely what's in the Siddur. I said, yeah. But Bertie, how do you say it? Just read precisely what's in the Siddur. So I opened the Siddur, everybody stood up, and I began. He who gives salvation unto kings and dominion unto princes, Whose kingdom is an everlasting kingdom. May bless our sovereign lady, Queen Elizabeth. Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, because the Queen's mother was still alive then. Philip, Duke of Edinburgh. The Prince and the Princess of Wales. And when I said those words, there was a very strange atmosphere and sound which broke out across the synagogue, because the problem was that the Princess of Wales was dead. She wasn't still alive. Lady Di had died tragically in this terrible car crash in that tunnel in Paris. And the thing was, when I said it, you see, the congregation didn't burst out laughing. They felt that inappropriate. And after all, well, there was three reasons. One, they liked me. B, they knew I was doing them two, they knew I was doing them a favor by being there. And three, they knew that I didn't know what I was doing. So they didn't want to laugh. So instead of an explosion of laughter, there was an implosion of laughter, which is a very strange sound when something like 600 people are going, and that's amplified by 600, as they tried not to laugh. And of course, the problem was, once you said it, you can't unsay it. And it was their fault. It's not my fault they hadn't taken it out of the show cedar. And he told me to write precisely what was in the cedar. It's not my fault. Anyway, so I left the bima and went back to my box. At this point, frankly, I would have been very happy if somebody had come along with a hammer and nails and nailed the box down. But anyway, they brought the Sefer Torah back, and the president introduced me, and I walked to the front to the lectern to address this gorgeous little boy who stood up with a smiling face, waiting to hear the words of wisdom from the visiting rabbi. And I smiled at him, and then I said, now, before I go on to address today's bar mitzvah boy, looking around the show, I would just like to point out that for those of you who were listening carefully a few moments ago, you may have noticed a slight change to the normal wording for the prayer for the royal family. Now, at this point, nobody could control themselves. And the 600 people are laughing their heads off, roaring with laughter. And I waited until there was complete and total silence. And I said, I'd just like you to know that for some of us, she'll live forever. And of course, they burst out laughing again. And then the embarrassing situation was turned on its head. It became, from a chasaron to a maila, it became, instead of something which was not good, into something which was great. In fact, it's almost as if it was engineered in order for me to start my drasha with a laugh, which the Gemara famously says, always start a lecture with something funny. If you get something funny happening, people laugh. I was doing a lecture tour in South Africa 2 years ago. And there was, I think it must have been about 5,000 people over the week that I was there. And one of the questions came in. It was interesting. Rabbi Guttentag mentioned this. Somebody said, Rabbah, R-A-B-B-A, Rabbah. Judaism doesn't seem, he said, to put too much emphasis on laughter, apart from Purim. And I said to him, well, what was the name of the first Jewish child? So he said, Avram. I said, no, Avram wasn't born Jewish. What was the name of the first Jewish child? It was Yitzchak, which, as we heard before, means laughter. Laughter is so crucial, so imperative to us, that in actual fact, the first Jewish child was called by a name that means laughter. And I would argue that it's the essential ingredient that's got us through to, well, 3,500 years of sometimes pretty difficult history, and definitely tough times. And I remember the first time I was ever invited to go and lecture in Zurich, in Switzerland. I had always wanted to see Switzerland because I heard a rumor that they do mountains there. And coming from Scotland, I wanted to see these second-class Swiss mountains. So I immediately said yes. And then a week later, having accepted the invitation, I received a message that the organizers, it was meant to be a university student weekend, the organizers would like to have a tape of one of my shiurim. And I remember distinctly thinking, this is a bit upside down. Surely it's appropriate to find out if the guy can speak and he's any good before you issue the invitation and he's accepted, not afterwards. But I thought perhaps they just want to see the cultural differences. And so I sent 2 tapes. The first was a video cassette, a videotape. Do you remember videotapes back in the Stone Age? Yes, videotapes. I sent a videotape of me talking to university students, which is what I was going to do. And of course, when you're speaking to university students, it's very laid back and lots of humor and very jolly, at least when I'm speaking to them. And I sent that. And then I sent along an audio cassette. And the audio cassette was of me giving a serious share, because I can occasionally do that too. And I sent both these off. And a week later, I received another phone call from Zurich, and it was from somebody called Mark. So the phone rang, I picked up, and the voice says, hello, is this Rav Rubinstein? And I said, yes, this is Rav Rubinstein. He said, hello, Rav Rubinstein. This is Mark, phoning from Zurich. I said, oh, hello, Mark. Hello, Rav Rubinstein. Rav Rubinstein, it's about the video you sent. I said, yes. They liked it very much. But when you come to Zurich, no humor, please. No humor. Und, there was an und, you mustn't become friendly with the students. Because in German culture, a Herr Rabbiner is aloof and separate. So I mustn't become friendly with the students. Und, there was a third und. Do you know how much they were paying me for this? You don't get 3 unds for what they were paying me. Und, no Yiddish. Because Yiddish sounds to a German ear a bit like somebody speaking, I don't know, whatever accent you would consider to be funny. So like a Jamaican accent is a little bit, that sort of thing. So this is a problem for me because basically I do have a sense of humor. Secondly, I'm not an aloof sort of rabbi. You probably got that by now. And third, Yiddish, well, I learned in Gateshead Yeshiva for 7 years in Yiddish. And Yiddish, amol, that's a joke for Yiddish speakers, a Yiddish word pops out. How am I going to get through this? Well, and this is where I ruined my rabbinic reputation once and for all, but I don't know if anybody watching this has ever seen Star Trek. And I'm talking the original Star Trek. I'm talking about when Vulcans were Jewish. I simply based myself on Mr. Spock for the 3 days that I was in Zurich. Logical, no humor. And somehow I got through it. On the Sunday night, the frum ladies of Zurich, called the Agudas Fraugruppen, they were getting together because they wanted to share from me, this time in Yiddish. And so I went along. I had my big pile of Jewish books, much bigger than this one. I came into the room. There was about 800 ladies there. The Alta Bobbers, the great grandmothers, were sitting out front like this. And I put down the books, and then it occurred to me I'd made the most enormous mistake that any speaker can possibly make. I'd forgotten to ask how long I should speak for. So in Yiddish, I said to them, Entschuldige mir, wie lang muss ich etwas reden? How long should I speak for? And a voice shot back from the back of the auditorium in an American accent, in English. That depends. And they all started to laugh. They all started to laugh. And I was absolutely disoriented because I'd spent 3 days with these people and no humor. And suddenly everybody's laughing. And it was really quite funny. In other words, that depends. If you're any good, you can go on all night. If you're garbage, 5 minutes and go away. That's when I discovered that most of the wives of the Agudas Fraugruppen were not Swiss. They were born in other countries. They were normal human beings, and therefore they had a sense of humor. Now, I'm actually being unfair to the Swiss. The Swiss do have a sense of humor. It's just that compared to a British sense of humor, you see, if something makes you laugh, you'll go, in Switzerland, humor should evoke no more than anything more than is considered rude, and that's actually true. So in my research for that book that I mentioned before, when Rabbi Guttentag and I were talking about the little book for big worries, dealing with serious illness, in the research it showed an incredibly interesting thing, that people who've got a serious condition, a serious illness, and are able to laugh about the situation, have a 75% higher recovery rate than people who are not. Laughter truly is the best medicine, and it makes a huge difference. I remember one day the front doorbell rang in our house in Singleton Road in Manchester, and I opened the door, and outside it was pouring, coming down in buckets, and there was my late mother-in-law standing there in the rain, and she was soaked. I said, "Mother-in-law, what are you doing standing there in the rain? You're soaked. Go home." Now, the reason that joke works, now I can't see you laughing, I can't see any of you, but I'm assuming that you laughed there, tittered a little bit. The reason the joke works is because, as Rabbi Guttentag said at the beginning, and when we were discussing, the thing in the joke that makes you laugh the most is the unexpected. And that's why it's called the punchline. You don't see it coming. You expected me to say, "Mother-in-law, you're soaked. Come in." But that's only because you never met my late mother-in-law. But as Rabbi Guttentag pointed out, that there is a famous Gemara on the subject, and it's a Gemara about somebody called Rabbi Breaker, which indeed I was going to quote, although I'm going to tell you, if it's not a complete chutzpah, in my experience, every rabbi who I've ever heard who quotes this Gemara quotes it incorrectly, or rather abruptly. They finish too soon. Because if you ask anybody the story of Rabbi Broika, who was commonly to be found in the marketplace of a place called Beit Lephet, I could open the Gemara here just to prove that I'm a fully qualified rabbi. So here's the Gemara in Tainus in Kov Beis, that Rabbi Broika was always to be found. B'shukah de Beit Lephet, Avashikha Eliyahu Gabei. And when he went to the marketplace in Beit Lephet, he used to bump into Eliyahu Hanavi, as you do. And the interesting thing about bumping into Eliyahu,
Rabbi.
Yes.
Yeah, I know the second part of the Gemara. You're saying you're a qualified rabbi.
Hit me. Go on.
So this is the famous Gemara about Rabbi Broika, who would have meetings regularly with Eliyahu Hanavi, no less, Elijah the prophet. I met him on Seder night. And by the way, I've been laughing behind the scenes.
I met him in Purim night.
Yeah, I was at my bris. And so the two gentlemen went to Rabbi Broika. Rabbi Broika asked Eliyahu Hanavi, who's the Ben Olam Haba? You're testing me now, aren't you?
I am about to torpedo you, but carry on. If you want to set yourself up for mega failure, carry on, Rabbi.
Hey, I'm not scared. And so Eliyahu Hanavi pointed to these two individuals.
No.
So far, so good.
No.
No, first he said another.
Yeah.
No, but I'm talking about the laughter part.
Okay, get to the laughter part. See if you get that right.
Right. He said, pointed to two people, and he said, those two are B'nai Olam Haba. I think that's the plural, the Ben Olam Habas. And so they went up to these two people and they said, okay, what do you do? And they were perhaps, I don't know what they were thinking, maybe they built hospitals and shuls and schools, whatever, Balik Tzedakah. And they said, do you mind me asking you, what do you do? What makes you a Ben, we know you're a Ben Olam Haba, you're going straight to heaven. You must be very special people. And I want to know what kind of activity you engage in. And they said, we're Badchanim. I can't remember the exact Aramaic terminology. Would you forgive me for that?
B'duchi onon.
B'duchi onon, there you go. I was saying in Yiddish, we're Badchanim, same word, Badchanim. What we call comedians, we make people laugh. But then the Gemara, this is the point where you think people stop, isn't it?
Mm.
But then the Gemara carries on, and it says that we look for people who are downtrodden, and those are the people who we pick up by making them happy. Okay, come on. Got to give me something.
I'll give you 75%.
Sorry?
I'll give you 75%.
You think what?
I'm only going to give you 75%.
Oh, that's 75. That's good. That's more than I got in my GCSEs.
Downtrodden. Okay, so here is the book. Right. The first thing, actually, as he said, he says to him, is there anybody in this marketplace going to heaven?
Yeah.
And he says, that fellow over there.
Gemara in Tanis.
That's getting cough based on my knowledge. So he goes over to the fellow and he says, what do you do? What do you do? Well, this fellow, interestingly, was possessed with one of the gifts that sometimes Jews are born with, which allows them to save thousands sometimes of Jewish lives. He didn't look Jewish. Right. Hair and blue eyes. He was in charge of a prison. The Romans employed this Jew, who they didn't think was a Jew, to be in charge of a prison. It was very common in those days for Romans to take a Jew prisoner. He'd done nothing wrong. Just put him in prison, accuse him of something, and wait for the family to bring them money to get him out of prison. If a Jewish woman had been taken captive, obviously the worst possible things could have happened by the time they got the money together. And they didn't know he was a Jew, made sure that nobody laid a finger on her. Fine. And then, as you say, he then says, anybody else? So they go over to these two guys, and as you say, well, B'duchi onon. But that's the line. You went through. You actually did get it right. You didn't stop abruptly. If you
thank you very much.
No problem. And anytime you want an insult, just give me a call. However, this is what it says, and this is the astounding thing. Ono matchinin atzivi. Now you translated it downtrodden. It's we find people are depressed.
Depressed, yeah.
Depressed. And Rashi says here, and this is incredibly important. Rashi says, what did they do? Right. So let's pause for a second. What causes depression? So there's two types of depression. Of course, depression is, as it were, the complete absence of laughter and humor. Some people are born with clinical depression. Their brain simply doesn't generate enough of the happy chemical, which is called serotonin, that makes them laugh. That's one type of depression. But there's another type of depression, and that's called reactive depression, when a person finds themselves in a situation which they just cannot handle. And in one school of psychology, they cite 4 classic triggers for reactive depression. When I left the UK, It says 10 years ago, 1/3 of the population were on antidepressants. 1/3.
Wow.
That's big.
Wow.
What causes depression? So if you have lost somebody who you're very close to, so you lose a clue, you're going to be sitting sheep. Somebody and you'll sit sheep. That will obviously make a person depressed. Okay. 2, you get a diagnosis of a very serious illness. You're very seriously not well. That can make a person depressed as well. 3, you lose your job. Or you can't pay your bills. You might get thrown out of the house or the apartment, wherever you're living. That makes a person depressed. And the 4th one in this school of psychological thought for reactive depression, intriguingly, is moving. Moving. I mean, for example, if you lived in a leafy suburb of Manchester and you moved, as I did, to Brooklyn, that's classic reasons for being depressed.
I mean, the most I've moved in the past month is from the couch to the kitchen.
Oh, well, yeah, well, that could, depends what the couch looks like, I suppose, or the kitchen.
Yeah, go on.
Anyway, so basically, Rashi says, what did they do? So somebody has lost a child, well, a brother, a sister, a mother, a father, hopefully not a child. We all want our children to be sitting Shiva for us one day, do we not?
Yeah.
The alternative is not acceptable. And Rashi says that they were samechim, they were jolly, and they made them jolly, but he doesn't elaborate. On the other side of the page, somebody called Rabbi YY says that they had the verbal dexterity to make people laugh again. But let's just consider that for a second. Hold on, somebody's lost a child, or lost their job, or lost their health, or had to move to Brooklyn. What did these two comedians do to change the reality that they faced? The answer is nothing. They still lost a child, or lost their job, or lost their health, or moved to Brooklyn. But
they can't change the situation. The only thing they can change is their perspective on it.
How they looked at it. Yeah. And I know you're interested in Kabbalistic thought and you're a great mystic. I want to tell you what Ben Ish Chai says.
Yeah, that's funny.
Sorry?
That was funny.
Thank you. The Ben Ish Chai says that the name of Hashem is Yud Kei Vav Kei. We know that bit. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. He says that the 4 basic elements for the creation of the universe were fire, water, and air and earth. Fine. He says if you put the 4 letters on the 4 elements, then one of the Hays refers to Shemaim. That's Aish, right? Aish. That's the 4 elements. The one Hay stands for Aish, which goes up to heaven, and the other Hay stands for earth, down here. He says it's the way of a flame to dance upwards, but earth pulls you down. I've got to tell you, Rashi, everything we've just spoken about, believe it or not, Rashi wrote about around about 1096 on his commentary.
Yeah, we were talking about humor. I remember in school, when did Rashi live? I remember our teacher telling us that Rashi lived for 25 minutes. 10:40 till 11:05. So it's a stupid little, right? 10:40 is 25 minutes. But that's how I remember it. That's another good tool that humor can use.
Absolutely. So listen to this. This is really incredible. The Jewish people, this story is Parshas Chukas, is chapter 21. And the Jewish people have come to the border of Israel quickly through the land of Moab, of Edom. And the Edomites come out with their army and say, oh no, Jews, you want to come through our land? It's war. And Hashem says to Moshe, tell them to go back. Tell them to go around the long way. And they do. Now, they spent 40 years to get to this moment. Now they're turning back, going back to where they came from. Listen to this. They used to be Harahor, and they left Harahor, that's the Edomites, Derek Yamsuf, to go back towards the Yamsuf, Lisvai Beseretz Edom, to circumnavigate and go around the land of Edom, Betitzar Nefesh Ha'om B'derech. And the souls of the people became Titzar. Now, everybody watching this will probably remember there's a book called the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch.
Yeah.
Kitzar is to shrink, reduce, depress. All the soul became depressed. Now listen to Rashi. This Rashi is absolutely astonishing. He says, the called over, Hakosha ala Adam, anything that a person experiences in life which is difficult and painful for them, no for Polish and Kitzur Nefesh, then the expression Kitzur Nefesh applies. Reactive depression. Ka'odam, listen to this. If it's like a person, Shetarach ba'alav, when things are very hard for you, and your mind is not broad enough to understand what you're going through, and there's no place in your heart to accommodate the pain you're going through, that's Kitzur Nefesh, that causes depression. Precisely what we said.
Yeah.
Definition of depression. Now, if you're with me so far, let me tell you a story. I think this will bring this to life. Now, I moved to New York. I was supposed to work for an organization, which turned out not to be an organization, for 3 years. It lasted 10 months. I had to pay a mortgage in Manchester still for my house, and I still had to pay the rent for a crummy flat in Brooklyn, and we were in quite a mess. And I must admit, having lost a wife, having moved, having lost a job, I checked 3 of the boxes for reactive depression. I wasn't feeling very good. It just reminded that sometimes even the greatest struggle. David Miller said, Kaylee, Kaylee, Lomadov, Tani. Hashem, why have you abandoned me? Or he seemed to have abandoned him. Anyway, it was just when I was feeling not good, I remembered a story that somebody told me, and I'm only allowed to tell you this story because the person who it's about said I could. It's my oldest son. So my oldest son has had some pretty tough times. He had to have some serious surgery to his legs when he was 14. And that caused him to be in a wheelchair for 1 year. Right, so he missed a very crucial part of, his boyhood. And then his mother got breast cancer and she passed away. And this goes back, I think, 6 or 7 years ago. He phoned me up and said, Dad, no, my son lives in Yerushalayim. He was then working for Yaakov Hill, the famous Sephardi Kabbalist, who's collected thousands of unpublished manuscripts. And my son is a professional photographer specializing in photographing ancient manuscripts, which is very specialized work. Because the material, the cloth or the paper can be falling to bits.
Yeah.
Anyway, so he phoned me up. He said, Dad, I didn't want you to worry, but I've just come back from the doctor who's confirmed the diagnosis. I'll be totally blind in 10 years' time. Now, the reason that I had that little book out to show you from before was because I'm a rabbi, just like you, and that means I deal with people and their problems all day long. I wrote this book to help people dealing with serious illness. And I have to tell you that I'm very humbled to tell you that has helped literally thousands of people. It's written for the person who is helping somebody who's not well. But the strange thing is, even though it wasn't my audience, people who are seriously not well have got it. It helped them very much. One guy I know, because nobody bought it in the bookshops because it said illness in the cover.
But you can't even buy it in the shops now. I got this years ago from your son.
Yeah. So now the thing is that the book is, I've got some, but it's almost completely sold out for the very simple reason that people were sick. They went out and bought 50 copies to give to other sick people. One guy in Brooklyn bought 500, gave away 500 copies.
Wow.
Anyway, so I know about this stuff, but when my oldest son said he was going to be blind in 10 years' time, I think the English phrase is gutted. Just that, or rather a year later, he was in Manchester photographing a wedding. He was flying back. He was due to fly with Lufthansa to Frankfurt and from Frankfurt down to Tel Aviv. At the last minute, the plane was cancelled and he had to take, I think it was a Jet 2 flight instead. Yeah, I know. Oive is completely, remember the plastic seats sitting at the back, and he wasn't very comfortable, so he decided to pay a little bit more money for an extra legroom seat, and he moved to the front. So he's sitting next to some fellow, and he said, hello, in his Manchester accent, and the fellow said, hello. And the fellow said to him, are you from Manchester or from Israel? He says, I'm from Manchester, but I live in Israel now. Oh, me too, said the fellow. Whereabouts in Israel do you live? Yerushalayim, my son said. He says, I live in Renana, said the fellow. So you're born in Manchester. So my son says, well, as a matter of fact, I wasn't born in Manchester. I was born in Gateshead. Oh, the fellow. I know Gateshead very well, because when I was studying medicine at Newcastle University, I used to study every week with a very well-known rabbi. Have you ever heard of Rabbi YY Rubinstein? He said to my son. My son said, yeah, I've heard of him. That's my father. And so the plane took off, and then my son realized he was going to be sitting next to a doctor for 5 hours. Well, Scottish and Jewish. Free consultation. So he told him all of his problems, the problems he's had with his legs. In fact, his mother passed away from cancer. And eventually told him that he's going to be blind then in 9 years' time. And this doctor turned around and said, well, as a matter of fact, you're wrong. I'm an eye specialist. And we developed a surgical technique 18 months ago in which we put a lens, a hard lens inside the retina to stop it changing its shape, which leads to the blindness. And I'll do that for you. Now, my wife says I've got to be very careful what I say here, because I don't want you to think that I'm big-headed. In fact, I can think of fewer human beings on the planet who deserve to be big-headed than me. But it would be honest and fair to say that I have had, over my career or lifetime, the ability to teach thousands, in fact, tens of thousands of Jews.
Well, count me among them, please. Thank
You're
you.
extremely kind. A couple of years ago, I was speaking. I said South Africa to 5,000 people when I was speaking to the ladies leading up to Tisha B'Av for their annual gathering in the Binyani Mahal. It was another 5,000. If you teach somebody, says King David, one word of terror, you're there. In a sense, already, I could evenly claim, it would not be ridiculous to say that I've had over 100,000 Talmidim.
Wow.
That guy, that doctor, he's called Andy Fink, or Dr. Andrew Fink, was my first ever Talmud. When Project Seed came to the UK, Joey Grunfeld brought it to Gateshead.
Yeah.
And we used to go from Gateshead and travel across the River Tyne to Newcastle, I think it was the Wednesday night, 30 of us, to learn one-to-one with the community, and I had a university student called Dr. Andy Fink. And this was the guy who was sitting in the chair next to my son. And he performed that operation, and my son will never go blind. Well, how do you think I reacted when I heard that the guy who was sitting next to him on the plane, after the plane had been cancelled, and after he'd paid the extra legroom seat, was sitting there, was the guy who could save his sight? Well, I must admit, I cried, but then I laughed. It's the unexpected, as you said in the introduction, it's the unexpected that makes you laugh. I thought that Hashem had forgotten all about YY Rubinstein, but he'd written this down in his little book from over 40 years before that I had sat and learned with this.
40 years?
Yeah.
How old are you?
You can still ask a fella about that in public.
You said I could ask you anything I like.
Did I say that? All right.
Yeah.
In August, I'll be 65.
Mazel tov, you don't look it.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
All right, well, Rabbi Rubinstein, you've given us so much to think about how laughter, we don't always see it straight away, but, you know, Yeshua Hashem Keref Ein, it can come anytime. The unexpected, sometimes we don't see it, sometimes we do, but with the sense of humor, you've shown us how it can really help us through life. And I love what you wrote in the book and what you quoted earlier on, that people with a sense of humor have a higher chance of survival, which is a phenomenal thing. And I find that a lot with some of I met a lot of centennials, is that the way? People over 100, they've got such a tremendous attitude to life. It's not for me to say that's why they have their longevity. Obviously, you know, when there's physical illness, we can't survive it. Chas v'shalom, lo yalaini v'tapaini. But a sense of humor really helps us have a better life, and it betters other lives as well. You know, it's like the opposite of coronavirus. You know, if someone doesn't care about it and they go, oh, you know, if I get the virus, I get the virus. Well, they're wrong, because not only they might get it, it can affect others. Laughter, I think, is the same thing. And if someone's got a sense of humor, so it gives them a better life, but they have that opportunity to give others a better life as well, give them a better perspective. And thank you for helping us see that tonight. And we really appreciate giving us your time. I wish you, Rabbi Rubinstein, and everyone who's watching, a Chag Sameach and Shabbat Shalom, or a good Shabbos and good Yom Tov, whichever one you prefer. And thank you very much. Shkoyach.
Real pleasure. Maybe we'll do it again sometime. God bless. A great Shabbos.
Thank you.